So,
once.
Gene, what the image you're sort of projecting right now is we going from centralized large power plants, nuclear, or to decentralized and localized? Because, for instance, doesn't make sense to me to put solar panels and put the batteries far away so you can charge them far away and have sort of supporting the national grid. More is like a trading position. Like if you have energy, excess energy from solar, you can put it back to the grid. But if you don't, then you don't need to. You are local. You can pretty much be disconnected from the grid all the time. The sun runs if you need to. So this
Yeah,
decentralized centralized model also brings an interesting model of financing. And you mentioned sort of quickly about different administrations in the U.S. coming up with different models of financing, solar or nuclear. But they seem to all of them to converge in the fact that we need more energy from other sources than fossil fuels, despite maybe what we're talking today in the political arena that we're going to go back to fossil fuels.
yeah,
Any comments on that?
quite a number of them. So you brought up two different things there. But so the first is that we certainly are moving to a more decentralized model. It's not something that the utilities like. That's the old school model. They want to make the power, sell you the power, move it over transmission lines. But we found there's a lot of problems with that, right? Because in order to generate the power being done, even with fossil fuels, it has to be, transmitted over transmission lines. And in order to continue with the growth of the grid, you need more and more transmission lines. And so there's that T&D transmission distribution cost. Typically, the way it's done with utilities, they have a ratepayer. It's done by ratepayer adjustments into the tariffs. And so each year they go, how much more do we need to build onto the grid to do these things with the transmission? And they go, okay, we need a 10% increase in what the ratepayers are paying to cover the cost of that transmission and distribution. So under a distributed model, like you described, where we have localized power, we eliminate the need for all that big transmission costs and development. That goes away. We're making power on site essentially, or in a local regional area. And that's really called a microgrid. For lack of a better term, a microgrid really is we're gonna produce power. We can be on grid or off grid. It's going to be localized, and it provides the benefit of not having to buy power from long distances away, and it provides the benefit of having resilience. And in many cases, it supports the grid because the grid, varies in its frequency and how it operates. And so that can be a challenge for grid operators when you have a high amount of solar on the grid or other things that cause wind, that cause the grid to power up and power off very quickly when you have those resources intermittent, running the grid. So having localized power is the future of where we're heading. There's lots of things related to technology on that. That's microgrid controls, security. These controls control, the energy production from a solar system, from a local generator, to EV charging, bidirectional EV charging, batteries, fuel cells, all the things that can generate power, distributed energy resources, or DERs as they're known. That's being controlled by a very smart system that knows the best economics to operate that system. So maybe it's buying grid power at midnight, right? That's the best operating. And it does that. And then all of a sudden it goes, wait a second, it's daytime, sun's running, we got a solar system, wind's blowing, whatever have you, and let's go ahead and pull more of that power in, and let's cut back on grid power. So decentralized microgrids are the future. A grid of microgrids is much more resilient than just a grid. Okay, so a grid of microgrids is really going to provide resiliency for anything, earthquakes, fires, all the things that you could think of that would, knock the grid out, over distances. Is something that a grid of microgrids is going to help alleviate. And that makes it also more fungible, more financeable, because now we know that we're going to be guaranteed power coming from a certain period at a certain time, and we know how to control that much more. So, and this also goes to nuclear power. Small, medium reactors are going to be microgrids operating in localized areas. So it definitely will change the way we do things in so much as that, you know, the idea of the way the grid was reminds me of we all had phones in our houses that were connected to wires, and now we're not. We're on cell phones, and it's very much the same. We're going to be having these wireless
Okay.
microgrids that produce power on site, and maybe they're backed up with diesel or natural gas or something else. It's a nuclear reactor that can operate, and they run 24/7. So they are not just beholden to making power from 9 to 5 or whenever the wind blows. They're really going to produce power, when you need it on time and keep emergency, and critical loads and facilities operating, through
Gene,
storms and
you,
emergencies.
you brought a sort of question of how the solar energy in particular will emerge, right? We talked about the space it takes. We talked about the fact that you need batteries. You cannot run it 24/7. But also, can it survive without tax credits? We know that there was a regime of tax credits, big tax credits, and now suddenly, is it still long-term viable without these tax credits? If I'm a small, let's say, residential or a small business going towards solar, what should I do?
Yeah, well, that is $1 million question, Manuel. It's probably very well timed. So the impetus of this administration and the one big beautiful bill has really had a huge impact on solar, EV charging, all the things that require tax credits, in order to make those really very, very well financeable and pencil, frankly. And so what's happened now for residential, they have to have their systems built by the end of the year, and installed, and then the tax credit goes away. So I think just keeping it in separate buckets, the residential solar is faced with a tremendous amount of uncertainty of their ability to proceed forward. There's going to be tremendous challenges there. The only thing that would save the residential industry is going to be the fact that the residential industry, the cost of power to homes and residences is a lot higher. So that's one. And then over time, if it's increasing greater than 10% a year, in the next 3 years, you're going to have a 30% increase. That kind of covers the tax credit. The other thing is that the residential markets are going to need to be lean and mean. They're going to really not have layers of solar sales development companies selling for contractors. The contractor will have to learn how to sell themselves and just put a very nominal markup on there. And so basically cutting out probably, anywhere from 10 to 30% of the cost.
Mhm.
Same with financiers. That may be challenging to add another 10 to 20% of cost. So if you eliminate the funders and you eliminate the developers, and now you just have a contractor that's building it, they could still build it in a way that is cost effective, probably half of what it costs now. And that's going to be the way you purchase your solar, um, for the near term. Third party finance will work in the near term too, based on the fact that those are kind of considered semi-commercial projects. On the commercial side and industrial side and utility side of solar, it's a different game right now. Some of the largest utility projects have been put on hold because they're not sure if they can get, through the next sort of 8 months up until July 4th or 6th is the date, and they need to have enough continuous work and materials procured in order to safe harbor, the project itself and the tax credits. So some of those are very questionable, in the commercial industrial space. it's a very similar situation. We have to get projects started, engineering, we need to get product secured, and we need to do continuous work. So we need to do engineering, buy products and things that are custom, and then we can continue building those over the next 2 years. So what that's created right now is a mad rush to do solar. It's all of the companies that couldn't do it are now doing it, and they're actually they're moving in a way that that's forcing them to make decisions now rather than say, well, let's kick the can down the road and wait till next year to see how this goes. So this is their chance to like do it, get the tax credit, and move these projects forward, or pretty much stand aside and wait to potentially the next round of politics where you might have a more solar friendly, um, you know, um, group of people in there. And so that's a bigger question because it could be for quite a while we don't have that.
We're
So,
talking only, in the framework of US. And by the way, in US, you have federal and you have actually state. You have states like California, which is the fourth largest economy. So they have their own, I was going to say power, but there's the same way of distributing finances and taxes, right, that the federal government has. So
well,
I think we see already a trend toward this kind of separation on a state by state.
I I I think so, but you have to remember that, the tax credits under this past administration, there's a 30% tax credit for everyone, okay? And that's including nonprofits, and schools. And you also have, in some cases, an additional 10% tax credit, depending if it's in a low income area or near a coal closure area. And you also had a 10% tax credit for if it was US made and you could, prove that enough of the system is US made. So that's up to 50% of the system cost.
Wow.
That's federal. So if that goes away, which it will, then you're reliant on two things. You're relying on maybe some states that have renewable energy credits. California is a rec market. You have Illinois has a renewable energy credit. Parts of the Northeast have renewable energy credits. So that'll cover some of it, right? In some states, there'll be pockets that'll work. And then the other thing is the high energy costs. So you have to remember, just like residential, commercial rates are jumping. So you add a lot more of these very large data centers, they suck up all the bandwidth. It's inevitable the rates are going to go up. You can't just make them pay. It's just going to make everybody pay. So those rates, if they climb an average of 8 to 10%, which they seem to be doing over the last couple of years, over the next 2 years, well, then now it's an interesting situation because even without the tax credit, the rates go up 10, 20% higher, and maybe the cost to build it goes down because we're not required to use prevailing wage. That change comes if we're not taking the tax credit, we don't do prevailing wage under that bill. So now cost of install is less, the energy cost is greater. You'll still get depreciation and some of those things, but ultimately it'll be a little more challenging and everyone will take a haircut, meaning that the contractor will work on a little less profit. The OEM manufacturers will have to take haircuts if they want to move their solar panels and inverters on these jobs. Developers and even the financiers will be like, all right, look, like what's it going to take to get this job across the finish line. And okay, the contractor, they're going to take a haircut. Manufacturers take a haircut. We take a haircut. Everyone chips in to, maybe lower their success fees and their profit, but there's still some success. So I see that happening in a great way. And I'll end with this on the tax stuff. I've been in this for greater than 25 years, and I've seen the solar tax credits expiring countless times, countless times. The 11th hour, the night before the tax credit expiration, what's happened every time in the past is there's been an extension. And the reason these tax credits got expired or are set to sunset in the first place is part of the one big beautiful bill was the administration need to show where they're going to cut money from in order to pay for these things that they're doing in the one beautiful bill. So what they do, they cut medical, they cut waste, fraud, and abuse, they cut solar tax credits. Then the one big beautiful bill got approved. So it's done. So now what happens normally in government is, okay, well, that got done. We forgot about trying to keep the budget low. And now we'll start spending more money, okay, which is the case of what's starting to happen now. You're starting to get a lot of pushback on, Medicare payments and stuff, and we want more of that in now. And so now they're going to start taking stuff that they cut and bringing it back. And being that next year's an election year for the midterms, I kind of thinking, and again, maybe I don't have a fortune ball or anything like that, no magic 8 ball I'm shaking right now, but I do think that there's a very good probability that right before the midterms in July, and midterms are in November, they're like, hey, the Republicans did a great job, even though they created some of this challenge. And we're going to
Yeah,
go ahead.
you actually painting a very interesting picture because on the back is the economic law of supply and demand, right? So if
Well,
the
and
demand goes up, prices tend to go up to adjust for higher demand. Now you have other sources of energies, nuclear, solar, hydrogen, we didn't talk about it today, that can deliver at a certain price point, right? Today it's higher, but as the
exactly.
two come to equilibrium, you'll have to get to the point where with or without tax credits, with is the price adjustment, is the basic law of economics. And that will kick in, as you said, if consumers or small businesses start to run out of electricity, the fridges go off in your supermarket, right? And they
Absolutely.
spoil a lot of food.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just finish with that one thought I had on the big beautiful bill. I expect, in July, there's going to be a lot of pushback from Wall Street. Okay, Wall Street, they make a lot of money on tax credits. They make a lot of money on financing solar and energy storage. If that goes away, Wall Street suffers. If Wall Street suffers, then likely elected officials will suffer. So there's a top-down push. And if I had to flip a coin and bet, I would bet today that, and just my own personal opinion, that those tax credits will get extended for 2 more years or something like that during this administration to make themselves look good to get themselves reelected. And so that'll stop on that. And then getting back to your cost of energy, inevitably, Manuel, the cost of energy has never gone down. I have yet to see any utility across the US say, hey, we're giving you a 10% discount this year because it's cheaper. It just keeps going up. So that cost parity eventually, without any kind of credits at all, is going to reach a point where we're at parity, and it just doesn't make sense to buy power from the grid. Why not just buy it and put it on your own home? And the utilities are pushing back so much on some of that stuff that they're actually charging people with solar a solar fee. This is how they're trying to get you not to do it. They're like, oh, you have a solar fee that says you do solar. Well, yeah, you're helping yourself, but you're not helping, the neighbor. So we're going to charge you a fee because you're not paying for your share of the grid upgrades. But inevitably, this is going to be part of the solar death spiral that started a long time ago and forced us to start adding batteries to every solar system. And as that starts to grow and batteries start to come down in cost, which they will, like solar panels, they're still in their mid development cycle. They're not in a fully mature, full
Yeah.
cycle there. Another 3 to 5 years, more manufacturers come online, better technology continues to press globally. Um, it'll be solar and battery and grid defection, and you're going to have people that are just like, hey, I don't even need the grid. I don't want the grid. We're fine without the grid, and that's that's where I think the biggest change will come. And at that point, it'll be just a grid of microgrids. So
We
maybe that's 10 years from
we have a lot of market forces. Let's separate them for a second, right? We have the financial part and the price of energy, the cost of energy. It's actually factored pretty much in every part of financing. So if this goes up, the federal bank will have a question about why the inflation cannot be tamped, right? because it shows in all these economic numbers. And then it shows in the political arena, as you said, people and companies will push one way. Of course, there is inertia in the system, so large energy producers will say, no, let's not change, right? We love this model where we can raise the prices and be the beautiful companies again, right? Delivering energy. So you painted a very complex picture of this environment, but we'll have probably to wait to see how these forces play once against the other, or they get together. Not to mention actually the technology evolution, which is following a Moore's law, especially if we talk about solar panels that are electronics essentially.
Yes,
So
I agree. I think you look, energy is part of the spend, and so that is a big challenge when you're trying to tamp down on inflation because okay, maybe the products that you're trying to buy are could be potentially lower cost, but everything from transportation fuels to the facilities that they're held in to the manufacturing, if all the energy cost is going up at that accelerated rate, that's just passed on to the customer through products and services and the things that they have. So those are things that are you're not seeing straight on the front end. It's kind of coming from the backside of these facilities that are looking at their internal costs of goods sold, and they're like, well, energy now is this, so we're going to raise our product to this price. And that is part of the challenge that the Fed faces with looking at at the inflation and saying like, how do we tamp this down? And I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, to be honest with you, Manuel, because trying to build that number of data centers that is so much more power than we're currently even have on the grid right now is, I don't want to say it's not impossible because we can do anything if we throw enough money and technology at it, but just to get there is going to be very difficult. Every data center needs to be its own self microgrid power plant. And anytime they have wires that connect to the grid where they might be sucking power from that grid at any given time, is basically taking power away from industry that needs it now. And then they just claim that they need more, transmission and distribution, and then hence the price of energy is going up to commercial and residential customers to pay for all that. So
in
it's gonna
some
accelerate.
way, the national grids create this equalizer that you mentioned, right? Social equalizer, right? So power, it's about the same cost everywhere, plus the taxes, but the power, it's so because
Yes,
it's
but
distributed on a very large kind of model, right? It's
right,
economy
but
of scale
it is,
working
but
there.
you still have a very disparate amount of energy
Sure.
and a lot of smart grid controls coming in from the grid operators that can tell when the power is being used and how much. And so it's if you go to some of the Midwest, those utilities aren't quite up to speed yet. They just charge a kind of a flat rate for the kilowatt hours. But if you come to California, Hawaii, a lot of these other states, they're getting close to a place of real-time pricing. So it's getting, right now we have demand charges based on tiers, based on time of use in the day, and they're in buckets and they're sort of bigger buckets. But as it goes forward, they're getting close to real-time pricing, RTP, which means that prices could spike in an hour and then drop, precipitously. And in the end, though, you'll pay more. So it's not fair for everybody. It's all over the place. So ultimately, homeowners and residents and renters, pay a higher rate than commercial and higher rate than industrial. So it's certainly a lot of levels to it and complexity, as you said.
You have I'll bring AI in a question right now in the connection with CSG, but you give me this image that will listen to the weather report. Next hour will be sunny, so turn off the air condition or the heating. Oh, 2 hours from now we have rain, and with rain we need to turn off all this, right? Because
Absolutely.
RTP, right?
Yes.
But we talked about AI, we talked about hyperscaler data centers, the amount of energy they require. but also they have, of course, the sustainability challenge. You mentioned actually a sort of a good cycle when we use heat from, especially from methane, from natural gas, to both power and cool the data centers. They big cooler. They need a lot of cooling. Somebody that didn't see the NVIDIA, you have pipes running next to the electronic components in order to provide enough cooling. How AI is revolutionizing or changing the ESG reporting and sustainability compliance? We talked a lot about power, we talked a lot about budgets, but let's bring the sustainability question.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge question as well. I think, AI is changing everything, right? So everything it touches, it changes. I think in general, having already done some work with AI and ESG reporting, prior to kind of what I'm doing right now on the energy side, is that, what AI brings to the table in computing and in intelligence, it really starts to speed up things quite a bit. We eliminate a lot of the manual calculations. We eliminate a lot of the manual processes, and not just on reporting, but actually gathering the data. Okay, AI now is getting embedded. It's embedded into everything. So it used to be people getting data and bringing the data and then say taking that data and compiling the data. A lot of that's now becoming automated from the point of energy use or the point of waste, all the way into computer systems, and it starts to move faster and faster. So AI is really reducing the cost and time it brings to bring the ESG reporting into the market.
Mhm.
And then AI is also being used to analyze the ESG reporting among all the different reporting agencies. So if you think about how many ESG reporting agencies there are and what each one does and how it's calculated, AI is also being used there to look at all of those and either normalize those or use those for investment criteria. Even though there's been a big pushback on ESG, within this administration, ESG is still a driving force of quite a number of funds, quite a number of green bonds, quite a number of very large, BlackRock still using ESG criteria in their investment decisions. So they are using AI to help do a lot of that screening and a lot of that work and coming up with the very best investment criteria that they feel is providing not only value to the environment, but value to their investors. So it's a continual march, and it seems like every day AI, blockchain, all these things are really driving the process to lower the costs of reporting and create security across those reporting platforms. You're seeing the ability of using blockchain to eliminate the need for a lot of these different intermediary steps to check the data to make sure it's not corrupt. So that's an end-to-end solution. You take that with the AI and you're moving that forward. One person can do more than an entire staff of people could do years ago. And so it may eliminate some jobs, but that one person armed with AI can really do a lot more. So I think this whole sort of AI revolution in ESG, sustainability, energy is really optimizing and speeding up the process for us, at a much lower cost, which is probably the big benefit that we can see from it. And there's nothing slowing that down. So it's really providing a great future, I think, for us and in the next generations to come that didn't have to go through all the heavy lifting, and they just click of a button and everything's happening for them, and they can see data in real time and they can make actionable decisions based on that.
And talking about AI and a little bit on sort of the international, not only competition that we know between China and the US, but also I've seen other countries that are rich in sun in forms of renewable energy or gas and oil and gas, like the Middle Eastern states, the Middle Eastern countries, right? they seem all of them to start to invite people to put their data centers close there because they can produce the energy locally and consume it locally. Essentially, if you look at AI, it's a way of converting energy into information, right? It's
Absolutely.
put electricity on one end and you get information, actionable information on the other end.
Absolutely. In fact, I've been working with a group and I know some others that they're using AI to analyze the grid to see where is the best location to put those data centers. So that would take a lot of time for someone to do manually, a whole team to do manually, looking at
Sure.
everything that's required, and they're able to get there and create a report, within a minute or two. So it is accelerating things in a great way, and so we need more energy to run the AI, and AI is also optimizing the way we're going to use energy and where we're going to get it from. So it's
And
going both ways.
Gene, first thing I have one last question for today. I also want to mention that I don't want to wait for another 80 speakers between the time you spoke the
Yes.
first time and now. So I hope to have you back. But we usually close every session with advice for aspiring professionals and recommends, what to do. You mentioned jobs will change. You mentioned AI. You mentioned energy jobs, right? From installers to wholesalers to retailers to designers to engineers. And, I cannot go through the whole list we covered today, a great list, by the way. So, what's your advice for aspiring professionals? And those are also people in the mid career and people at the beginning, people just going maybe to the first degree in university.
Yeah, I think really is to embrace AI and start using and learning AI at an early stage. It's going to be so involved in everything we do. So the best thing that I could advise anybody is if there's an opportunity to work in AI, to learn AI, would be to do so and do it early and get a good grip on it. This is just reminds me of the computer revolution of people were too afraid to use computers and they got left behind. So it's here to stay. Embrace it, get involved, learn it, and work with it as much as you can because it's your future.
Thank you very much. And, it reminds to me also the revenge of the computer because before that we had mainframes and minis and so on,
Exactly.
and now it fits in our pocket. So if you look in everybody's person, the computer took a revenge. It's called a smartphone or a
Yes, it's the
phone, right?
same. We're going through an AI revolution, so learn it, embrace it, and it's going to be it's part of your everyday life. And for folks that are just getting like coming out of college, early days, early jobs, they're on the front end of this thing, so they're gonna, the trajectory for them is to be in that space and be an expert, because a lot of folks like myself and others that are industry veterans, we're not. We haven't learned it. We're playing catch up. So they have a real advantage now to take the future and grab it and run.
Also, it's nothing wrong if you are in the middle of the career to catch up.
I intend on doing some learning, but the difference from starting out with it and learning the very basics and taking it
Sure.
all the way up and choosing what area in energy or sustainability or what you want to environment, there's so many areas of focus that AI is going to affect, and being able to sort of pick your path, right? That's cool.
As I said, I would like to invite you back and thank you. Thank you for taking the time today to visit with us. For all our audience, please make sure to tune in every week for a new episode of AKFI Actionable ESG Talk series. You'll gain new perspectives, fresh perspectives on how to mitigate risk and create value by integrating ESG and digital transformation and, of course, AI. Until next week, goodbye from AKFI, from me, from Manuel, and also from Gene. Gene, thanks again, and hope to see you soon again on the next talks. Thank you.
Thanks, Manuel. Have a great day.
You too.